So, Jellycats. Thoughts? I love Jellycats. I think they're so adorable and well made, and there's just such a wide variety of them. I mean, when have you ever seen a campfire doll? But there's one thing they don't have. Construction equipment. And I just think they're really missing out, because imagine having a cute brick that you can throw at somebody without incurring permanent damage on anybody involved. And so for this video, I would like to make some construction themed plushies and maybe some other construction themed merch along the way as well. Hi, my name is Emily and I'm an amateur doll maker. Now, although the brick was the catalyst, the first doll I wanted to make was actually a traffic cone. Ever since I played the game Stray, I've wanted a traffic cone in my room, and this was the perfect opportunity to make this dream come true. But to ease myself into it, I decided to make a mini version first, and that begins with a paper pattern.
This is the base, this is the cone part, and this is the white reflective part? I don't know what it's called.
And so I took those pieces and cut them out of felt in the corresponding colors. You'll notice that I have two bases, one with a hole and one without. I didn't get much footage of this since I was mostly experimenting, but this was how it came out and it's super adorable.
I think I should make it a keychain.
And that I did, and this miniature experience gave me the confidence to move on to the full-size version.
Here's what we have to work with.
This huge bundle of soft orange cloth that I got for $5. I love the grid lines on it, it's very construction core. And a bundle of cream-colored cloth for the white part of the cone.
Now this fabric, it's very nice, very soft, but also extremely floppy. So we're going to be using my crappy Dollar Tree fusible interfacing to give it some structure. Ignore the packaging, it's not accurate.
And then, following the mini pattern, I began sketching and cutting out a big one.
Cone, base, white part.
As with the mini version, I cut out two bases, one with a hole and one without. I gave everything a good press and then ironed on the interfacing. You might have noticed I cut out two pieces of that white part, and this is because I've never been good at stitching curved appliques and maintaining a nice smooth edge, and so I thought it might help to pre-seal the edges by stitching two pieces together and flipping that inside out, if that makes any sense. I pinned that in place and stitched it down.
This white cream colored fabric is very stretchy, so it kind of warped around the edges. So in the future, if I were to make more of this, I would choose a fabric that is not so stretchy. Anyway, now I'm going to sew together the two sides of the pizza.
After that was done, it looked like a delicious cheese sandwich, but less delicious was how misaligned the white part was. It's just so unpleasing to look at. But since this was just V1, I decided to soldier on and attach the hat to the base.
Ding ding! Before I stuff the cone and attach this to the base, I'm going to add a little Jellycat face, just like the way I did with the small one. I'm going to embroider the mouth and then use doll eyes for the eyes.
After sewing on the base, it was time to flip everything inside out. This was more difficult than I anticipated because the interfacing was just so stiff and unwieldy. But eventually it all worked out and a cone was born.
Time to stuff the cone.
I've had this huge bag of polyester fiberfill stashed in the closet for a while, and for this project I finally busted it out.
Now I just have to sew up his butt and then top stitch all the way around. I am mostly happy with how this turned out, minus this debacle, but I think this would be so much cuter if there was some depth to the base itself.
And while I ruminate over possible improvements for Traffic Cone V2, let's move on to...
For the brick, I had to draw out this whole plan because I couldn't wrap my head around how to make the holes. And so far, this is what I've come up with. You separate the holes into two sides and then sew every side except the bottom, where you can reach in and sew the holes together. And that is how you profit. Time to see if my hypothesis works out.
So I began drawing out the pattern on some scrap paper, and unfortunately, upon reviewing the footage, I realized you can't actually see anything I was putting down.
So basically, this is what I got. I've marked out where I need to notch the fabric so that it closes together without too much fabric overlap. And I've marked out the inner tube pieces, which is about 2.5 inches wide and long. And then you need 6 of those, which will fill up all these empty space around. So the wastage of fabric is pretty minimal. Here it is all cut out, and now it's time to transfer it to the fabric. Okay, hold on, I actually miscalculated this because it only needs to be 2.5 by 2, not 2.5 by 2.5. So let's change that. There we go. Starting off simple, I'm going to sew together the short sides of the inner tubes. Now to assemble this monstrosity, I have to attach the tubes to the holes and then sew together the body of the brick. So, time to hand sew the holes. I don't think you guys know this because I haven't done too many sewing videos yet, but I hate sewing around circles. It's just such a finicky process, and that's why I also hate sewing around sleeves. Very annoying to deal with, but it has to be done. I can't say the imagery is all that flattering, but let's flip it and see how it looks. And of course I messed up. Dang it. Okay, round 2. Round 2 was a little better, but I just don't really like it. Round 3, once again, much better, but still, why is it so wrinkly? This is why I hate sewing circles. This looks like something you could put in a body horror movie. Attempt number 4, and it's so much better. So I'll show you what I did.
First, you draw a 1/4 inch allowance around the hole and then clip a few evenly spaced cuts, never going past the line we just drew. Next, flip the tube right side out and poke it through the hole until the 5/8 inch seam allowance is reached. And then hand sew the two together, making sure to stitch as accurately on the line as you can.
Still a little horror movie-esque, but way better than the other side.
After fixing the hideous other side, it was time to sew the two ends together, and this as well involved hand stitching. After all of that, I can finally stitch together the sides of the brick.
I know this looks like an indescribable lump, but basically I sewed up all the sides except for a little hole where I'm going to turn everything inside out and then stuff it.
Since there was no interfacing on this whatsoever, it was very easy to turn inside out.
Behold, a brick. I don't really like the mouth, so I'm going to redo it. There, that's literally so much better.
And then I stuffed it, sewed it, and ta-da! V1 of the brick is done. And while I ruminate over possible improvements for that, here is a roadwork interlude.
Yes! Alright, let's go into mass production mode. It's only been a few days and this is already covered in cat hair. Anyway, for V2 of this traffic cone, I'm going to add a seam allowance to the cone part of the pattern, so that will hopefully make the top point of the cone a lot cleaner and pointier. And then for this white part, I'm going to use a fabric that isn't stretchy and also just make sure this lines up. And then I want to add some depth to this bottom plate, and then for the bottom, should I try using a black fabric so it's more realistic? I'll see about that. Let's just get to working on changing that pattern. Seam allowance added. Now let's draw out the extra depth we're adding to the base.
By the way, you'll notice that I split the base into 2 pieces, and this was an experiment that didn't really work out, so please kindly ignore any instances of that. And then off I went to look for some black and white fabric. I recently organized my fabric stash into this cool antique chest of drawers, and now it's much easier to find the fabric I need, as opposed to digging through that huge Lego bag. What I ended up using was this black velvety fabric with a midnight blue sheen that I literally dug out of the dumpster, and for the white fabric, I picked up what little was left of this white IKEA bedsheet that I used to make a Victorian nightgown, which I have footage of but never made a video out of. By the way, look at how the morning sun is hitting my curio shelf. How ethereal.
I understand why this fabric was so undesired because look at how much it sheds.
For the interfacing, I used a much softer woven one, and I applied it only on the orange fabric to neutralize the stretch. I cut out the white pieces and pre-stitched them together same as before, and this time made it absolutely certain that they'll line up on the edges.
This is lighting a little too extra. I'll stop. Ding ding! Much better than the previous one. Also, not sure if you can tell, but the point is also a lot pointier.
Next, it was time to sew the cone to the base. And remember, please disregard the fact the base is split into 2. It was a failed experiment. Anyway, based on my experience with making a suit set following a vintage pattern, I decided to employ stay stitching and notching, which would make sewing around a circle easier and more tolerable. And with the much softer interfacing, the fabric was also a lot easier to feed through the machine, which was a huge relief to me. And then it was time to attach the black trim. I pinned the fabric together and notched it where the trim went around the corners.
Time to sew this mysterious lump together. Ignore how dirty he is right now, but look at him! He's so cute! You're still cute too, don't worry. Pet, pet. Anyway, it's time for stuffing. It's done. I think the extra trim around the edge might be a little overkill because now it's a little too thick. So if I ever were to make a V3, I would just skip the trim entirely and just do what I did for this one, except with a black bottom. Look at them. Adorable. Okay, time for V2 of this brick doll. Nothing much about the pattern itself is going to change. The only changes I'm going to make is I'm going to try applying interfacing to the main piece to see if I can give it some stiffness, because this fabric, while it looks really cool, it's very stretchy and very difficult to sew, especially if you have to pull really tight on it. And also I'm going to do what is basically the opposite of top stitching, I guess, where I sew the other side of this fabric along here so that it gives the illusion of a seam and it'll give the brick a more bricky look.
And so I set about ironing the interfacing to the fabric first before cutting the pattern out. I find that because of the softness and stretchiness of this fabric, it's incredibly hard to be precise.
This is a tripod I found on the side of the road last year and I've been using to film most of my videos at this point. And look at this. It's breaking. It's cracking. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna film my videos now?
So anyway, I cut out the pattern. Oh, you can see the tripod malfunction in action here. As I was saying, I cut out the pattern on the interfaced fabric and then cut out the notches and holes. I did also apply interfacing to the inner tubes, which I did worry a bit about because these tubes need to be turned inside out a few times while sewing, and eliminating the stretchiness of the fabric might impede those efforts. But that's a problem for past future Emily. Same as before, I sewed the short sides of the inner tubes together, notched the holes, flipped the tubes right side out, which was indeed a bit more difficult with the interfacing but still doable, and hand sewed the tube to the hole.
And I do believe the hole is a little more circular with the interfacing on.
After sewing all the tubes on, I decided to add the fake seams, where I simply folded the fabric and sewed a straight line from point A to B on the wrong side. This ended up working pretty well, so I went ahead and added them to every edge.
All the fake seams are now done, and now it's time to attach the two ends of the tubes. And the way I'm doing that is by folding over the seam allowance and then ladder stitching the two sides together. Now it's time to sew up all of these sides. I just realized this looks like a mouth. Hello.
And of course, I couldn't forget about the Jellycat face. Once again, I used doll eyes, and here I finally got footage of me embroidering the mouth. The last step is, of course, stuffing, and that should take us to the final reveal. But before then, let's add some fancy packaging on my roadwork patches. And with that, it is finally time for the final reveal.
And there we have it, my collection of construction themed stuff. Honestly, I'm pretty glad that I figured out how to make these holes that go all the way through, because it just wouldn't be a brick without the holes. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, maybe just have them on display, but I would like to perchance have them for sale at some kind of art market, although I don't know what prices I would set for them, because I did keep track of the time as I was making Brick V2, and it was 4 to 5 hours, I think. So if we're going by minimum wage rules, it'll be a very large sum of money, and I don't think anyone would spend that money on a brick. But for now, this is just what I have, and I'm just going to keep them out of the reach of my cats because they are already getting covered in cat hair. These patches, however, if you would like one of these patches, check for an Etsy link in my description box and maybe snag one for yourself. They are one of a kind, so grab them while they're hot. And that is it for this video, and the last thing I want to say is Jellycat, if you would like to collaborate with me or sponsor me, you can reach me at